So, hey, I'm excited
Awesome.
to have you out there. If you all have questions or comments as we go along, we're happy to we're happy to take those. So, why don't we start with you and what's been going on with you? Nothing much, right?
Yeah, I know. So in February of this year, my wife and I decided that we wanted to make the big leap and leave the country and move to Costa Rica. And that was because there's in 2022, she went on her, or 2021, she went on a bachelorette trip to the country and loved it. And then the very next year, she's like, "Oh, you're gonna love it. Let's go together." So I went, and that was also amazing. And the very next year, I brought my parents. So I've been a few times, and she's been a few times before we moved here. And we were like, "This is such a great space that's in tune with nature. The people are amazing here, and just the sights and everything was so aligned with the life that we wanted to live." So we decided, why not make a creative leap instead of doing the things that we didn't want to do? Let's go ahead and um, make the leap and let fate help us, guide us to make the right decisions.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. And what was that transition like? Cuz I know that went quickly isn't the right word because you just said that was something you had been contemplating and letting
Yeah,
the universe guide you for a while. So it wasn't like totally a out of nowhere decision. On the other hand, sometimes we think about these things a while and then oh, all of a sudden you need to hurry up. And all of a sudden everything's happening, right? Did that happen? Yeah.
yeah. It was always like a joke that we were like, "Oh, let's one day we're gonna move there." And with all the stuff happening in the US in the last year or so, we're like, "Okay, things are not looking the way that we would like them to look." That's up to interpretation on whether or not you think the same thing. But for us in particular, it was not what we would like to see in our lives. So we were like, let's just not make this a joke. It was actually on Valentine's Day of this year that we made this decision. I wrote all about this on my Substack. So if anyone's interested in the whole journey, I'm still in the middle of it. I'm about halfway through at this point writing it, and it's just so much goes into such a big creative jump like that. And one of the things that I found was when doing that, I took a complete break on almost everything: the Substack writing, the podcasts that I have, all this stuff. And like you advocate for, I just needed to take a break and let things happen in my life while, can readjust it to everything and making such a huge commitment and move.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm reading along for that, hearing more about that journey. So that's really exciting. And I'm sure that's a great way to or I'm guessing that would be a good way to process that information too, right? Um,
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, like the process. I'm not saying that right. Process the experience of this massive move for yourself, going from one country to another. And I know there was of course, a lot of downsizing and selling off of things or giving things away, or just outright throwing a lot of things away that
Mhm.
that we accumulate when we stay in
Yep.
one place for a long
Yeah.
time, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah. So there's so much that goes into something like that. You don't realize all the stuff that you need to do until you just start doing it. Like there's no need to know until you actually have to go ahead and do the things that you need to do. And it's just the funny thing is we just randomly at some point decided, oh, let's just start recording, and we're going to start a TikTok on some of the recordings and all of these things that we went through. I made a bullet point list of literally all the stuff that I can remember in this process since February, like what happened when and what was I feeling when and all this stuff. So that's essentially the impetus of all the writing that's happened since then. It's just started off as bullets that I'm like, okay, what happened? What am I feeling? What are some common themes for creative people that you can find in, not if you're not necessarily making a move, you're doing some other big project. This is stuff you would encounter regardless of what creative leap that you're taking.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'll be tuning back into those, I'm sure. One of my personal goals for next year is to, about this time next year, I'm hoping to be living a year nomadically. Oh my gosh, I just
Mm.
said it out loud in front of people.
That means you've made a commitment to the world.
So maybe people will hold me to it now, but I'm hoping that I will live a year nomadically. The idea behind that would be, well, then where might I settle a little bit more or not? Maybe I choose to live that way a little bit longer. So
How long
that's
have
sort
you
of
been thinking about that?
I've been thinking about this probably since, I mean, off and on, probably since pandemic lockdown, because that's
Oh,
when
wow.
I started getting more immersed in these like on this sort of digital entrepreneurial space and hanging out with more creatives, more people who do things in the digital world. And I learned that it was a thing. I don't know that I quite knew, like, I don't know that it was entirely an idea in my head. I guess I do have a friend who has somewhat kind of done some wandering and international travel kind of thing, but not quite in the same way that people have done it intentionally. So yeah, I actually contemplated doing it this year, like doing it uh speaking of space opening up, like I had a part-time job that and contract that ended in May a little bit unexpectedly, and
Mm.
so that like opened, as most people, when things like there was a whole lot of energy being taken by what was not a very good fit or very good work for me, and then it was freed up. And after a period of time of kind of being fuzzy and foggy for about a month, then I had so much more creative energy and space. Um, and so, but
Mm.
I didn't yet have the energy to move again. I moved just a year ago, and my body was just screaming at me, just please don't do it
Don't do
again.
it.
Please don't
And
do it
that's
again.
often when you have to listen to your body.
And so I think it'll be able to handle it if like I spend a year like then I can like intentionally spend the year
Mm.
purging stuff and getting rid of like every time I'm in my apartment now I'm thinking, that could go. Like like right now, like I really don't even need that. Especially I have books and things that books I love and I love to read, but I'm probably not going to read them again. So maybe it's time for them to go. Like that's just one example, but and little knick-knacky things that you accumulate over time and that get at
Oh,
gifts.
you're telling me,
That
yeah.
stuff needs to go. So, or maybe I even bought it, but it's not even as significant to me anymore as it was. So, I'm
Yeah.
looking to get rid of some of that. So yeah, so I had this um big energy, like I just had a big surge of kind of creative energy that came out of that. And we know each other because of the feminist podcast collective that we're both part of, and I've been hanging out with this group for months in the with the idea that I would start a podcast. And with my other schedule, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this because there is
Mm.
just literally no time or energy for it. um and then when that changed, I was like, okay, then this is the time. So that changed. And like you were mentioning, the world and the politics in the US has gotten so terrible that I feel really convicted about putting out my podcast now, which is why I started a
To help
crowdfunding
everyone.
campaign for it, which is crazy. I know one of the things you help people with is launches or are launches. And I've launched other products. I've never done a Kickstarter before. And you definitely do have to have a strong stomach for a
Mm.
launch, because what they say is true. You get this kind of surge in the beginning of
And then
people
there's
who
a
are
huge
really
lull.
curious and they're giving and they're really interested in what's going on. And then you hit like the long middle stretch where you like get a trickle of like
Mhm.
interest in people giving. And then now it's a little over a week left I have in the campaign. And this is when like kind of people come out of the woodwork, and that is true because like just yesterday I got three donations yesterday, and that's like as much as I've been getting in a week, like in during the middle part. And that happens with selling a product or anything like that too, where if you do a longer launch, um,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a dip in the middle and then a surge toward the end. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
kind of in
interesting
that
because
phase
every
of getting a surge, I think. We'll see. And I've said I'm treating this like learning. If I make my financial goal, that's great. If not, I've like let people know about what the podcast is, which just as a mention is called Just Rest, Burnout Tips for Everyday Radicals. And it'll be conversations with really awesome people who are trying to change the world and get enough rest at the same time. And in fact, I think getting enough rest is changing the world. It's a way of pushing back against the culture that would say our value is wrapped up in what we do and what we produce, particularly in terms of work.
Mhm.
And especially in the US. I don't think it's nearly as toxic in other places in the world. But our way of being definitely infiltrates other places as well. But I know that other cultures aren't nearly as crazy as we are. But like that's my thing that's one of my ways of helping others and inspiring others to push back against against autocracy, against fascism, against whatever it is that we need to do to create a more caring and compassionate world. Because I care very deeply about that, and I know this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is going to be, and we're not just waiting to get to the midterm elections in the US. Like that's not what we're doing. This is a long-term project that we will have to rebuild um, whatever is left of a government, whatever is left of a culture that I think that we have left. And I would say the opportunity in that is that we could build it back better. I'm not in
Yeah,
favor of what's happening right now. Let me be clear. But if you have to rebuild it, like let's do it better the next
I mean,
time.
there's only one thing you can do when you've taken everything and burned it to the ground is to start and build the society that is meant to help the most people that live within it. That's the only thing that makes sense is to create something that wasn't written hundreds of years ago that no longer applies, especially some of the things, the foundations of the country were not great. So there's a whole
Right.
lot of stuff. And the Civil War did not exactly make atone for the sins of the people who started it. So we're just still kind of living in that aftermath of that.
No. No, I highly recommend our mutual friend, I think you did a live with Heather Vickery just a little while, like maybe a week or so, or a week or two ago. And she on her podcast, Was It Chance, had on Tad Stormer, who's I hadn't heard of him because I'm not on TikTok. But he's on other platforms now too, but an historian who
Mm.
had a revelation about 5 years ago that was like, "You know what? Everything I've known and have been teaching people is a lie about the founding of this country." Um, and he calls it the patriot myth that we have these great
Oh, right.
patriots,
Yeah.
these great founding fathers, and like they weren't great. Like they knew how bad, and it wasn't just like, oh, slavery was what it was at the time, and so they didn't question it. That's not true. They actually knew better, and they did it anyway because they knew it was in their economic interests. And just things like that are gross, like to feel into. And anyway, it's a really interesting pod, talking with him about that and about his journey of going from being this MIT professor teaching history to being a public historian in a really different way. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So speaking of creative risks, that is a really cool conversation about creative risk, like we're taking, I think, right now to some
Yeah.
degree. Yeah. Yeah.
What does it take to be a creative person in the world that we're currently living in? Even if you're not directly affected by it by living in the US, right? What are the ramifications of what's happening there across the world? And everyone is affected by it. If you're used to be the supposed leader of this free world, what does it look like when you're no longer that and you're kind of the opposite of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, what is it when you're not there? For you, not there anymore. Um,
Still affected by it.
my move is also a little bit, it's not exactly as dramatic, but, like, I moved from Ohio, which is a much, at least over the broad brushstrokes, conservative state, to Illinois, which is, Illinois officials just and Chicago officials just gave a press conference yesterday saying you can stay out of Chicago. Like, to the, if you want to set in federal troops, we don't want them. What we do, but what was interesting, I heard part of they did say something about, uh, they did talk a little bit about, hey, if you want to do something, here's a thing you can do in order to fund getting more guns off the street, because that would really help, the rates of violence in our city. Anyway, so because I live only 2 hours from Chicago, so it's not like that would be, I don't live directly in it, but it's not like it's far away either.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah. So tell me, we were before we went live that we were chatting a little bit about, like, speaking of, like, creative and exciting brainstorms that we've been having. Like, we had in our feminist podcast collective, we had a really cool session with you a few weeks ago, brainstorming ideas, and I'm wondering if you've had a chance to sit with any of those yet. Are there any, like, new ideas in terms of your podcast? I know you had asked us about, like, what's some crazy, like, think of the weirdest thing we could possibly do in terms of podcast um,
Yeah.
format for you. Have any of those been sticking for you, or you've been or building on them? Maybe you're yes-anding them.
I haven't gone really into them. I spent last week in Puerto Rico to see the Bad Bunny concert, and then hanging out with my in-laws there. So I haven't really had the opportunity. But one of the
Yeah.
things that keeps sticking in my head as far as a podcast goes and my interests, as well as being like a creative person, how can I use my interest in improv and bring that into the podcasting space instead of just doing a normal interview or just talk about something as a solo podcast episode? What can I do creatively as an improviser and bring that into a podcast? What does that look like? Maybe it's like pretending to be people needing advice. I can embody these characters and just ask myself questions and see what that looks like uh, as an improviser.
Oh, that sounds like a really cool. Um, it's a really cool idea to be playing with, and it actually, and well, and you probably don't know this. You wouldn't know this. I was actually a theater major in undergrad.
Mm,
Um, and it made me think of something I've found really interesting, kind of going back to, um, it's theater. It's from South America, and it's theater for using, improv for resistance.
mm.
And that's not the exact name of it. And so I'm Googling it right now. I did a whole paper on it, but it's not coming back to me. Right. Um, Anyway, I'll find it another time, but it was from, uh, parts of South America where they used, like, theater as a form of resistance to what's happening, so I that might be just throwing a little bit of fuel on your fire there, maybe, like, to not only thinking about improv and how can you work in that to your podcast, which is super cool, but does that also give us, um, the skills or a way to protest what is happening currently?
Yeah, I think all creative endeavors are essentially a protest. I've heard people say this, and I think it's pretty true that art is the biggest form of protests
Mhm.
within a society that doesn't want you to do art. First, they created the myth of like the starving artist so that people just don't attempt to do it because they know the power and the strength of something that is created by people that gets them to be moved by it because a lot of times things like facts and the truth aren't doing the trick, right? People don't really care, but if you put that into the form of something like a movie or a book or something that can show people through the power of story and things like that, then you can see the impact that it makes because they can see themselves in the story or other people that they know through the story.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So my Googler finally got it together. It's Theater of the Oppressed,
Oh,
from Brazil. Augusto Boal is the name of the person who um, sort of thought to have founded it, although I'm sure it was a community effort. But anyway, that might be a little. I found it really fascinating when I started. There's a ton of books on it. It's fairly well known. But right, I think all art, or art can and or certainly can be a form of resistance, right? And right, I mean, I think it is really interesting that to create. I loved what you're saying about the myth of like the starving artist, right? That I think some people embrace, or like, and I think I've seen people occasionally, and this is probably rare, but people who embrace it and are like, well, then then I don't need to take money for anything. It ends up being a way of devaluing what the work is that you're doing. The creative work is not really productive. So, oh, then it doesn't count and you can't charge for it, or it's okay to make pennies because I'm supposed to be penniless as an artist, or whatever that nonsense
mhm.
is. Or I think probably what works in the other way is like, oh, you have to have a real job. Your creative pursuits are something that you do, only, only on your free time or anything like that. I just saw Barbara joined us. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Um, so I don't know. You work with a lot of creatives. How does that play out for with the folks that you've met or work with?
I think there's definitely like two camps. There's a camp of people who are resistant to making money from their creative work because it's art for art's sake, which is often the thing that people say when they're resistant to making money from it. And then there's the people who want to, but they don't know how, and it's very difficult if you're not a well-known person or you don't have connections and all that stuff to become a working artist through the art. But one of the best books I've read on this matter is Make Art, Make Money by Elizabeth Hyde Stevens. And she explored the life of Jim Henson and how he essentially did commercial work in order to fund his passion projects like The Muppets and Sesame Street and stuff like that. So just because you don't think you should be making money doesn't mean that you can't or, you know, won't do it. But if you look at Jim Henson, he's very popular. He's like one of the most well-known artists to have come out, at least in the last 100 or so years, right? So what lessons can you learn from people who have successfully done it and break out of the mindset of, I don't need to make money from my art? It's not that you shouldn't make money from the art. I think people who don't want to make money from their art want to say that they're doing it for the art, but in order to fund yourself continuing to be able to do stuff like that, you do need to be compensated for it if that's what you're looking for. Obviously, you don't need to be compensated for it if that's not what you're looking to do. But if you're in this middle ground of yes, no, should I be a starving artist? Is that a real thing? It's a good read.
Yeah, I know I've read things you've written about it, and I need to put that back up toward the top of my list because I think that sounds like a fun book, and it's making me think of um uh, the one I've heard other celebrities say this, but like actors, like Denzel Washington is one that comes to mind, and he's like, well, if you see me like doing these movies where I'm probably making big bucks for it, it's because he's doing it, and it may not be the kind of project that would necessarily be his huge passion
Mhm.
project. I don't think he takes anything that like is violating his,
Right.
values or ethics necessarily, but like, okay, this isn't the thing I would be spending all my time on, but he'll do that, make a big paycheck so he can fund produce things he wants to produce and direct that are more meaningful to him.
Yeah. And I
That's just
think
one that
with
pops to mind, but other one, they do that. People do that all the time, right?
Yeah, and I think to go with along with the theme of your upcoming podcast is that doing something like that allows you to also rest because you made the money from the thing that you weren't necessarily the most excited to do, but it allows you to, take a break on things and wait for the thing that needs to come along that you're passionate about and that you will work for, even though you won't be making necessarily as much as you would like to. So there's like a balance there where There's stuff you should be working on, stuff you can be making money on. How do I balance the two, and how do you incorporate breaks and rest and all that stuff into that process?
Mhm. Yeah. I think that I just think rest is so important for creativity. I just know that in my own life that when I have significant amounts of time away from what it is I do, whatever the work is that I do, like my ideas are so much, more energized,
Mhm.
um, and things like that. I know that this was mostly when I was still working full time, but there was a big in my 40s, like if I had almost a decade of when I was training for marathons and things like that, I never did a full marathon, half marathons and some triathlons. And like the amount of time I had to spend training was so good for creative endeavors. Like
Mm.
because you were in your body in a very particular way and you really couldn't you just couldn't fret about the same things you fret about when you're not doing it. And so you're getting all of this. There really was it had this. I don't know. I don't know the neuroscience of why that works the way it does. Although I know that's a thing. But I would get the most creative ideas. I would even sometimes stop and type ideas into my phone that I would get so that I wouldn't forget them. Or sometimes it would be the podcast that I was listening to or whatever, or whatever, just some random firing of the brain that I'd be like, oh, that's a really good idea. And it would sort of solve the problem, solve
Mhm.
whatever creative challenge I was meeting or whatever the problem I was dealing with in my life. Oh, there's another idea for that. And I know one of my favorite ideas in Trisha Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance, while we're recommending books. If you haven't read that, it's foundational to understanding rest as an act of resistance, I think. One of the things she says over and over again in different ways in that book is that if we're always working, if we're always exhausted and sort of strung out and not, either working or barely functional because of how exhausted we are, we're not able to imagine that new world we need to imagine. We're
Mm.
not going to be able to imagine our way out of this toxic system. And that's a part of why we need to rest. And that the system doesn't want us well rested. Because if we're well rested, we'll be able to come up with that art that resists. We'll be able to, we'll be able to take the system down. Um, And the system doesn't want us to do that. It wants to keep us exhausted and barely able to pay our bills and always getting sucked back into the grind.
Mm.
And I mean,
Yeah, there's
that's going to be a really important piece, I think, of that will a really important thing for me. Stephanie's here too. Hi,
hey,
Stephanie.
Stephanie.
A really important thing for me to be exploring in the podcast is that connection between rest and resistance and creativity, which I think is sort of the Venn diagram that we're we're dealing with between the things that we usually talk about.
Yeah, I think to answer your why do good ideas come or taking a break? Because when you're working on a problem nonstop, you don't have the time to process it. So in the background, your brain is doing all this work, and if it doesn't have time to give you the solution unless you stop looking at it for a little bit. Even if it's just for a little bit. That's why you often get your best ideas in the shower, is because your brain has had time to process it, look at connections of other things that have happened in your life or things that you've read or done or any of that stuff. And it then gives you the idea like, oh, this is what you need because I know you're looking for it, right? So your brain is like trying to help you in the background, but if you don't give it the time to do that, it'll never happen.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. I mean, I think that's showering, going for a walk, just plain old resting or doing things that have nothing to do with the work or the problem at hand, that sort of thing. And I know Stephanie, who joined us, talks to a lot of creatives and is a creative herself. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. Feel free to drop that in the chat, Stephanie, for sure. Um, so I'm wondering, we've been at this for about a half an hour, Kevin, and I'm wondering if we're feeling like I was wondering if maybe we could conclude with a couple of questions that I was planning to ask all my guests, and like when I get my podcast started.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah. That sounds great.
So one of the things I want the podcast to be is both about like these big ideas that we've just been playing with this whole time, which is super fun, but also to be a little bit practical. So like to invite the people I talk with to say, okay, what is some way that you have, what is some simple way, it doesn't have to be complicated, some way that you rest, and what is a way that you resist? And those might even be the same thing. But so people have ideas of what they might do in this time. What is something you do that's restful? And again, it doesn't have to, I would say not sleep. We'll just say automatic sleep counts, and hopefully you get enough of that.
Yeah.
um,
Inner
but
part of resting.
yeah. What is something that you do for rest?
I think the best thing for me, at least, and I think play is often a way to rest, even though you're not necessarily taking a break or like still, like some forms of things like meditation or yoga or any of that stuff. Play is a way for you to work things out in a way that is more restful than working on the problem, and it sparks new ideas and allows you to find new ways to be resistant, right? Um, when you're playful, like just let's look at Gavin Newsom's press tweeting as an example. He's essentially just mimicking what Donald Trump is doing with his True Social account, and that's like a form of play. It's high stakes form of play, obviously, but that is still something that is a form of resistance, but it's also a form of play.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Um, and I want to lift up, I posted this on, I think, Substack and my Blue Sky account today. Um, I like to do, I really like to do like midday, like lay downs. Like,
Mm.
this is part of why I like now working at home on my own sort of timetable more. It's when I was when I was having to go in and work like in more of an office setting for a little bit, I
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, my body just doesn't do this very well anymore. It's just not attuned to it. And part of that is because, I can just decide to go for a walk at the middle of, when I feel like it,
Mhm.
for the most part. Well, I'm going to go for a walk now because I just need a break. I had a little bit of time between something else I had finished and doing this. And I'm like, you know what? I could use like a lay down for 15 minutes. So I just lay down in bed, put on like a guided meditation or something like that and rest. And I come back and I'm so ready to talk to you. I'm ready to have a creative conversation. I'm ready to I have a few other things work wise that I need to finish yet today. So that's one of the things I do. And then, um, I've been trying so my podcast is going to be one of the ways that I resist because I'm hoping to inspire other people to resist. Um,
Mm.
one of the things I've been doing is trying to find and follow like artists and activists who are doing boots on the ground resistance work to find more and more ideas for what are simple things that we can do to resist. And a few weeks ago, I went to a training by indivisible.org, where they were talking about some direct action things that they were doing. And I'm saying this out loud because I want to get back to it. One of the things they had tools for that you could do is go to local businesses in your area and ask them to post a sign that says, basically that ICE is not welcome here. Um, and it gives you the opportunity to give people a little bit of a training, which is that if ICE has no legal authority to come in and ask for people or paperwork about your employees without a signed court order from a judge.
Mhm.
And they're doing that a lot right now and walking in as if they have that authority, which they do not, again, unless there's a signed court order. And so even in a place like here, I live in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, which is a small-ish, university town, pretty liberal little bubble in the middle of what is probably otherwise a pretty red part of Illinois. Um, and so these aren't, this isn't a likely we don't have huge employers outside of the university. So there's probably not going to be a targeted raid here. On the other hand, it says something to people and it's good for people to know what, if it does happen, because it certainly could, what do you do? And so that's
Mhm.
one of the things that I, um, plan on doing because I get to meet other small business owners in the community. I've only been here a year, so it's a good reason to meet some small business owners and to um, you know, and to educate and maybe even start a little bit of a movement in our tiny little town. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, that the, like, taking a break thing, now that I'm not in office or working 40 hours per week, I do have the time to listen to my body and do what it tells me I need to do, because that's often one of the things that we don't have, stuck in the machine, right? So one of the things that we actually need to do is just listen to what our body is telling us and take the action on whatever that is, instead of thinking we need to be doing something. Our body knows better than we do.
Oh, our bodies are really smart. That's a great takeaway, Kevin. Our bodies are really smart. Listen to them. And we're conditioned, particularly in the US, to ignore them. In favor of powering through in order to get more done. But I don't know about you, but every time I try to power through and get more done, it's not done well generally.
Mhm.
And it takes me 4 times as long to actually get something done. I did that last night where I was like, oh, I'll just finish this one thing. And it was just past a point in the day when I was too tired. And I keep track of how much time I'm working on things. And I'm sure that thing took me an hour longer than it should have because I was just tired. It was too deep. It was something that was a little too detail oriented for that kind of brain, when your brain is tired. If I had tried doing it this morning, it probably would have taken me 20 minutes or
Yeah.
something, So that's a practical thing, but I think that's it. So anything else we want to share with our readers, viewers, listeners? What do you have coming up on the podcast? Anything, or are you still recalibrating
I'm
since you've
I'm
moved?
still contemplating on, like you were saying,
Yeah,
our discussion to kind of make it more interesting, even with the already. Is there a way to create some interesting things? Like, one of the things from their last uh, hot seat was maybe to make the interview a side part of your thing instead of the main part of your thing, and how can what you have to input be added to the front or to the end or both, in order to uh, supplement the actual interview and make that more of a I also have a guest versus this is the purpose of this is to talk to this guest, right?
right, right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what the next iteration of Standout Creatives is, and I'm enjoying, hearing and reading about your journey and Substack world as well. And I'll just mention, like I said earlier, I have about 8 days, I think, left in my podcast crowdfunding. I'm a little more than 20% to the goal. So if anyone is wanting to give to that effort today, again, that's for Just Rest, Burnout Tips for Everyday Radicals. And you will help me launch this podcast really effectively and much more quickly. So my plan, if I'm funded, would be that I could launch probably by sometime in November. If I did it on my own, unsupported, it probably would take me almost another year to do, just because I have to do it in between all of the other work that I have to do. I have
Right.
support; it'll be a lot quicker and easier because then I won't have as much worries about money to be able to make that happen as well. Speaking of that, and today only, I'll mention, if you give at $50 or above, you get a extra bonus. So there's all kinds of really cool rewards that you get, including things like free early access to the podcast, and other cool access to events and things that I'll be doing. But you will also get today only a free annual membership to my Substack, which is
Oh,
where the
cool.
community around the podcast is going to live in the future anyway. But that's a pretty generous gift. So if you want to get that plus some other really cool stuff at whatever level you choose, um, take advantage of that now. You have a few more hours to give before that little bonus goes away. So thank you, Kevin. I so appreciate you hanging out and talking with me. I know this is an experiment for both of us. I've done lives on other platforms, but not on Substack. So this is a new one for me. And I know you've only done it like one other time. So maybe
Yeah.
there'll be more in our future.
And even if, it's not as big as you would hope, it's still something that's going to live here and people can watch it back if they feel that it's something that makes sense to them at the time. So
Totally.
it's going to live in Substack in some manner for people to check out.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks for taking the time today, Kevin. And I enjoy to see, I'm looking forward to what comes next to you because I think it's going to be awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh,
Thank
it's just
you.
somebody,
Sure.
someone
Bye,
just joined.
everybody. Oh, bye. Oh, bye, Taka. I'm sorry. We're just finishing up. I know who that is. Friend of mine. All right. Bye. Nice to see you.
Bye.